Good morning. Oh, come on. Good morning. There we go. We got some energy here. Day three. Also, what a fun topic. So, I'm Nikhil Deshpande. I'm Chief Digital and AI Officer with the state of Georgia. Also, I am honored to be on the board of directors for the Drupal Association, and I am Nick at the Hill on D.O. On the behalf of the marketing working group, I am really excited to bring this session to you. Um, Participating in the group, I have the privilege to work with some extraordinary talent and other board directors like Lynn Capozzi, who leads the working group, Imre Mijing. I'm sure I'm not saying this right, but he is a core contributing member. Unfortunately, they both were not able to be here. But also we have the honor and privilege to work with Suzanne Dergucheva and Sean Parrott, which, who have really contributed a lot to this particular effort. Also, the DA has hired an external consultant, Sarah Saunders, to work with us on the marketing effort. Now, we have all heard Dries talk about how important marketing is, along with a good product. But we needed someone who was a seasoned professional, also was somebody who was new, because one of the challenges in us knowing Drupal is that we know Drupal in and out, and having someone from the outside work with us and how they see and what they see apt as our strategy was very important. So we worked with Sarah on a go-to-market plan. Now, for some of you who are well-versed with the marketing strategies, a go-to-market plan typically is used for a commercial product with certain revenue streams attached to it, but then how do you plan a go-to-market plan for an open source product for a nonprofit organization? And really that was the challenge, because a lot of it really is dependent on volunteer labor. So I'm going to share the highlights of our GTM vision here. So the first thing we really wanted to do was to refresh what a Drupal brand is. And learning from a lot of the folks across, and this might not be obviously a very news for any of you, is that people who are not in the know of Drupal, a lot of it look at it as like, oh yeah, Drupal used to be. Yeah, is it still around? Oh, great. But that's just not right, and we know that, and we needed to change that. As a long-term user of Drupal, but also as a customer who is attending to, responding to other organizations who have army of salespeople trying to pitch other products that are Drupal competitors. I can tell you that a lot of these things are so well planned, and these aggressive strategies to get other products in front of me are very well organized. And as a nonprofit, as an open source, I think all of us here and all of us around working in Drupal pretty much have to be our own sales team and volunteer and make sure that we represent and advocate for Drupal. So the vision really stressed on empowering agencies to promote and sell Drupal to clients, customers for the projects that we're working on, to drive an overall global awareness and help maintain open source as a viable part of the web. Now, how do we do that? The first step was that we cannot just go with what we have. We have to have a refreshed face. And that's exactly where Sean came in with his expertise, following design thinking process, leveraging community, leveraging other people to engage in how the design flows. Sean will be here today talking and giving an overview of the new design direction and the branding, each branding choice element as he walks through his presentation. But then also, once we have this refreshed set of a toolkit, how do we actually implement? What are our marching orders, and how can we create that groundswell of taking this toolkit and actually go and influencing this change? And that's where Suzanne is going to be talking about using this toolkit. And Suzanne also representing Promote Drupal, will be a critical bridge in making sure what we have built and what we will be building, how can we take that out to the market, and how can we start influencing this change. So without further ado, please, I'd like to welcome Sean to walk us through the rebranding efforts.
All right, thank you, Nikhil. Hello, everyone. I'm Sean Parrott, Creative Director at Acquia. For those of you who may be unfamiliar with Acquia, we are a digital experience company that was born out of Drupal. This week, we were also born out of a castle downstairs and to the right in the exhibit hall. So thank you to those of you who stopped by to check out our Drupal and Dragons brand experience. Also, in my spare time, I volunteer with the Drupal Association, working with folks like Suzanne and Nikhil and many others on the Promote Drupal project. And today I'm here to give you an exciting update on the brand evolution, and that's been part of my role as a creative consultant in contributing to the Drupal brand. But before we start, I wanted to ground us all in this slide that some of you may remember from 2 very long days ago, all the way back to Monday, during the Dries Note, where he made a point about how marketing is just as important as technical innovation. So as folks are pledging their time to Starshot and other technical innovation enhancements with Drupal, we also have to make sure that the marketing arm is running in parallel. And we have contributors and we have folks that are rallying to help evolve the Drupal brand so that when we reintroduce Drupal to the world, the marketing and the technical innovation are all running in tandem. So how are we going to do that? Well, in the world of marketing, in order to win, we have to stand out, and we're going to use creativity to do that. And creativity can really be a superpower, and I'm going to talk a lot about that today. And that is how Drupal will continue to grow and will continue to evolve. But first, let's start out with a big question. What is creativity? And I know that's a big, bold word that's difficult to shape, particularly on day 3 of a conference, but I'm going to try and boil it down here for all of you with one of my favorite definitions, which is that creativity is the defeat of habit by originality. And if you think about it, we all get kind of stuck in our ways. All these brands start looking the same and sounding the same. And the whole idea here is that when the rest of the market walks in a straight line, you have to zigzag. And you have to have the confidence to do that, and that's how you break through the noise, and that's how you create something unique. But the good news is, with Drupal, we don't have to manufacture that originality that some brands have to do. That's already baked into the brand, which is really good. So I'll showcase that here with a walk down memory lane with some old photos of DrupalCon gone by. As you can see the young Dries up here, releasing Drupal 4. And we're lucky enough to have this beautiful community, as I mentioned, already baked into the brand. And you can just see it here, and you can see the community growing. And we have this great foundation to build upon. And that's how the community continues to scale. And that includes all of you out there and so many others that have been part of this 23-year-long community tapestry that continues to grow. And everybody here is responsible for their own square, their own kind of contribution. And together it makes this big, beautiful, vibrant, ever-growing thing. So Drupal helps make an open web possible. That's the good news. Like I mentioned, Drupal has a lot of these things that other brands don't. But now we have to take all of this energy and shape it into a visual expression of the brand and really unearth the vibrancy of the community and make sure that all the life and energy of those photos that I just showed you all come through in the brand itself. Because creativity is the oxygen for growth. I'm going to come back to that word again. It is a superpower, and we have to use it effectively, and we can take the market by surprise if we do it well. But before I go any deeper, let's talk about just a brand evolution from an academic perspective and understand the value of what it really brings to the table and why it is important. A brand evolution is a great way for businesses to adapt without losing their key principles and vision. So as I mentioned, we have the key principles and vision. Dries mentioned we are the makers and defenders of the open web. So let's rally around that, but then build the brand up from there. So the brand evolution, I've broken down here into 4 key areas of focus. So let's start with number 1, repositioning the brand with an efficient logo design, obviously a really important element. Number 2, using color to modernize and elevate the company's look. Third, strategically keeping up with audience evolution. And then finally, keeping key values and messaging by offering new expressions for a changing world. So with that, every brand starts with a brand foundation. That's what sits underneath all of this. And before we can apply the 4 principles that I just mentioned, we have to be able to define who we are at the core. And we have to ask ourselves questions like, what do we stand for? What gets us all out of bed in the morning? And we have to crystallize that down into some short language that really represents a rallying cry for the Drupal brand. So with that, we've done that here, with this whole idea that Drupal has a soul, its purpose over product, an open web for everyone. And this is why Drupal exists, to be defenders of the open web. And we want to welcome people to the open web in a way that Drupal and the Drupal brand has never done before. So you can start to see some of this branding coming to life here. And now I'm going to play our brand anthem video, and you may also remember this from the Dries note, but I'll play it again here to show how all of this comes to life, and then I'll do a deep dive and unpack the full design system and show all of the thinking that went into this. All right. Hope everyone felt the energy of that. So now let's get into the brand guidelines themselves and look at all the thinking that was involved in the making of this. So when you get into brand guidelines, there's always a section at the front that represents the corporate ideology. And part of that is distilling things down into a set of core brand attributes. So with Drupal, we determined that Drupal is flexible, Drupal is ambitious, Drupal is open, it's powerful, and it's secure. So everything that we do as a brand, how we look and feel and walk and talk in the market, it all needs to align to these attributes. And think of these as the 5 levers that we'll pull on in order to activate the brand. So that's where the guidelines begin. And from there, we get into the brand identity, the visual side, which starts with the logo. And obviously, the Drupal drop here is the most iconic part. We don't want to move away from that. It's really good, it's strong, it has a positive representation in the community, but we do want to refine it a little bit and modernize it. So think of this as an evolution, not a revolution. So the Drupal drop represents the fluid nature of the open web, and it sort of creates this ripple effect that extends outward, creating an impact greater than its size. So we've deconstructed the droplet down into three pieces. On the far left, there is the greater drop that represents classic Drupal and the impact that it has had on the open web. In the middle, we have the community drop that represents many parts coming together. And then finally, on the far right, there is the individual drop. Drupal couldn't exist without individual contributions, and all of that starts with a single person, and the compound effect of that is immeasurable. So, with that brand mark, we've paired it with a refined typeface that has more rounded letter forms to match the fluid nature of the droplet and help it feel more fluid and consistent as a whole. So these are just subtle changes that we've made that hopefully help modernize the brand in a big way. And then there's the color palette. Our evolved color palette represents communities and the boldness of future possibilities and varieties. So we start with the blue. We're not abandoning that. Drupal was built upon blue. We're going to keep that and build around it. And we have here both a lighter and a darker blue. We have a lavender and a deeper navy. We have this earthy green, a vibrant orangey red, and yellow. And all of these colors were then poured into a combination of gradients that can be used in really interesting and vibrant ways. And of course, the color system was designed with accessibility in mind, and we've provided a curated selection here with guide rails to show which foreground colors should be used on which background colors so that we can remain in compliance. Okay, next, we've added our brand elements. We really want our brand to appeal to both the passionate veterans of Drupal as well as this rising tide of newcomers. So this allows us to have a lot of fun from a visual perspective with mashing up some of these elements. And this includes a set of GUI block inspired frames. And if you think about buttons, icons, and blocks as kind of being the visual language of the internet itself, there's a purity to these things. They're classic and they're familiar elements, but they've been stylized and then offset with this tactile pattern to underscore Drupal's maker culture. So if you think about Drupal and the maker culture and the tribe, it's really where tactile meets digital. These frames can then be used in a variety of colors and styles to house text and imagery. You can activate them through a single color, 2-color, 3-color. There's a lot of options here. Additionally, we also have a new set of brand patterns. These patterns harken back to the beginning of the internet, when the internet was fresh and fun, and they're inspired by old PSD patterns, liquid screensavers, and old computer grids, but they're modernized in a way and they're colorized in a manner that is uniform and that can be ownable by a brand. Okay, next piece of the brand guideline system is the typography, a really important part. We have chosen our main typeface as a font called ZT Gotha. It is an open source font. It's clean and modern and intended to match the fluidity of the logo. It has these really unique alternate characters that you can use and sort of substitute in to make certain senses unique and have a little bit of a flair. And then we've paired that with a secondary typeface called Noto Sans. This is what's considered a world font as it supports many, many languages. So this set of typefaces combined together make for a really versatile and powerful pairing. Okay, let's talk about putting it all together. When we combine the photography with our new color palette and our new typeface and the new GUI window system, this is what you get. And there's a lot of flexibility here. We can move that GUI window around from left to right. We can use a lot of different types of photography. And you can see here, as was shown in the video, the variety of layouts that will be available to you as you market Drupal out in the world to keep the brand both fresh and fun and interesting. Also, let's not forget about the fun swag and event experiences that we have in store. Some of you may have been lucky enough to catch one of the coveted bucket hats or seen one of those around at any of the after parties last night. So be on the lookout for even more fresh brand swag. And for those of you who stick around for the second half of this and join our marketing contribution session, we may have a few more of these floating around, so stay tuned for that. We've also used this new brand recently to launch our revised event experience. These are some photos from the Web Summit event in Lisbon, which is a massive tech event. It has up to 70,000 people, so it was really great to see Drupal representing out in the world with this new look. Okay, let's talk about where to find all this cool stuff and how to use it and the importance of brand governance, because that's really key. All of the brand elements you saw in this video are available to the community today in our very own data asset management system, otherwise known as a DAM, and anyone in the community can go on here and download these elements and use them in your marketing materials today. And by the way, this was built on a product called Acquia DAM, and if any of you want to learn more about utilizing a DAM for your company, please come find me after today's session. And if you want to check it out right now, feel free to scan the QR code. That'll take you directly to our brand portal with all of the guidelines, and you can get immediate access. So please come join us later today for our marketing contribution session to learn more and figure out how you can get involved. So now I'll pass it over to Suzanne to talk more about the marketing toolkit.
Thanks, Sean. Great. So did that look fantastic? I get excited looking at the brand, and I've seen it a whole bunch of times. So yeah, I loved seeing everybody's eyes up on the screen. Everybody seems to be excited about this, and it's just really the beginning. So having a brand is one step, but I'm going to talk a little bit more about all the work that we're going to do to really amplify the brand and get it out into the world. And that's where all of you here can get involved, and I'll also share lots about how you can get involved. So as Nikhil mentioned, my name's Suzanne Degacheva, and I'm leading the Promote Drupal initiative, but I also run an agency called Evolving Web. How many of you here work for Drupal agencies? I'm guessing lots of hands in the room. Yeah, so as a Drupal agency, I get the fun job of going out and pitching Drupal. Sometimes we work on projects where, clients are already really on board with Drupal, but sometimes we are selling Drupal against other CMSs, other platforms, and we get up there and we tell them why Drupal is great. And every time I get excited and I share my personal passion, but I know that there's a lot of other folks doing exactly the same thing. And wouldn't it be great if we had this brand to really support our message, and that when folks go out after the sales pitch and do a bit of hunting, that Drupal.org would really reflect everything we're saying in all of those messages. And so our goal with Promote Drupal is not just to, have a nicer looking Drupal.org, but it's really to have materials out there to support anyone who is researching Drupal and trying to evaluate whether it's the best fit for their needs. And so that's why I've decided to really get behind Promote Drupal, dedicate a lot of my time, and also a lot of my agency's time. So I work with some designers on my team, project manager, copywriters. A lot of people are involved to amplify the message of Promote Drupal and to amplify the new brand. So Promote Drupal, as Dries mentioned on Monday, we're here to do hard things, and open marketing can be maybe seen as a hard thing. Like, how are we going to get all these agencies together to amplify the brand and get the message out about Drupal? How are we going to get everybody on the same page to increase Drupal adoption? And that's that's really our goal. And so we've developed a few things that we think are really going to help get people on the same page with the messaging, get people on the same page when they're using the brand. But there's also a lot of work left to do. So I'm going to outline some of what we've already done and give you a taste for the marketing toolkit that we've put together. And I'm also going to show you some ways that you can get involved, and hopefully you'll see some way that you can fit into this picture. So brand narrative. How many here have heard of brand narrative before? What does this mean? Yeah, a lot of you. So, we have an amazing looking visual identity, and we need words to go along with that. So things like taglines and headlines are great, but we also need a larger narrative to show how does Drupal fit into the market? What are its differentiators? And we want to create this for different audiences. And our new brand narrative really focuses on the evaluator experience. So folks looking at Drupal and comparing it to other platforms, whether they're marketers, whether they're IT directors, or even developers who are picking a platform. And so we have a few really specific elements in our brand narrative, like a nice tagline, create ambitious experiences that scale, that we've developed. But it's all backed by a strategic framework. So if you look at our brand narrative, you'll be able to find a mission statement that really grounds the whole brand in what Drupal is trying to achieve as a whole. You'll be able to find our positioning statement, which compares us, how do we stand out, our promise and truth, and some brand pillars. And I think the brand pillars are really key because those lead into much more detailed messaging that we have for different audiences, and where our message really gets personalized for those audiences. As much as possible, we tried not to reinvent the wheel. There's a lot of material already out there, and you might have heard of the Open Web Manifesto. How many of you have read the Open Web Manifesto? I encourage you to look at it now. If you're looking down at your phone, I'll assume you're just Googling it. Open Web Manifesto, what is this? So effort was put in, and I know Dries has mentioned it many times. It's really what our community stands for, and it really explains why open is important, why open source is important, and how Drupal really fits into that picture. And so the mission of Drupal is to enable the next generation of innovators and entrepreneurs to compete effectively. So that's us. We're the innovators. Our brand positioning is what makes us stand out from the crowd. We're the leading open source CMS. Let's be confident about it. That's what this brand narrative is all about, is confidence and taking Drupal to the next level. But we're also the foundation of DXP. We are a DXP enabler, and we're secure, we're stable, so we've got all of these attributes that are reflected through the narrative. And I think the positioning statement's really key to that. So I won't go through every aspect of the narrative, but I will talk a little bit about the pillars, because as I mentioned, I think those are really key to the bigger messaging framework, and having content that we can copy directly into our pitch decks and directly into the material that we're creating about Drupal. And so these are the 4 pillars. So we're flexible, open, stable, robust. These are key elements of Drupal. And when I think of a brand narrative and I think of these pillars, I hope that every piece of content we're creating about Drupal is reflecting at least a couple of these. And possibly for the most important marketing content should reflect all 4. And they're quite, I would say, each one is really independently important. So we always talk about Drupal's flexibility as a strength. I think I hear that in every conversation when I ask people why they like Drupal. But its openness is something that's so unique and has a lot of really important benefits that folks that are not in the Drupal community might not realize. So often in Drupal we just talk about, oh, the Drupal community, essential to how Drupal functions. And we all know what community means because we're here at DrupalCon and we appreciate the fact that the community exists and is fueling the innovation. But folks who are maybe from a proprietary software background, they might not have that same image that comes to mind of community. And so it's really important that when we're speaking the message about Drupal outside of the Drupal community, that we also explain what the value of the open part and what that means and why it's essential and how it makes Drupal better. Scalability. So for folks either from a marketing background or an IT background, that's important for various reasons. The ability to support, enterprise-grade projects, to scale up in terms of performance, size, just to support the quantity of sites and the quantity of content that Drupal supports. And then robustness covers many things. So we know that Drupal, checks the checkboxes for accessibility and security, privacy, in a way that other platforms don't always do. They don't always prioritize accessibility, security, privacy in the way that we can. And so the brand messaging framework really breaks those pillars out into messages that we can use to speak directly to marketers, to speak to IT leaders, and to speak to developers about why they should be picking Drupal and why it's going to make sense for them. So we put a lot of effort into this. And there's more to be done, more personalization to be done in this area. So beyond the brand narrative, which is a relatively short document, a few pages long that we can all start using, we have a marketing toolkit that we're building out. And the toolkit is meant to have ready-to-go elements that we can use as we're pitching Drupal and as we're doing all kinds of activities. So earlier this year, I had a chance to guest lecture at a university and talk about Drupal, and I was one, lecture in a bigger class about CMS options, and so I felt like, okay, I really have to represent Drupal. I need to have a deck to talk about, the benefits. But I was speaking to a student audience, so wouldn't it be nice if there was a deck ready to go for that audience of like new potential developers or leaders in technology. So the marketing toolkit has slide decks that can be adapted to those different types of audiences. It's all using the brand. It's also using elements of the brand narrative, and it's pulling it all together. And as we put this together, we realize that there's a lot of other things that we need to have in our repository. So we need to have testimonials from recognizable brands. We need to have case studies ready to go that support our messaging. We need to have stats that are backed up, that we know where the source of the stat comes from and that we need to keep up to date. So all of these elements are part of the marketing toolkit and also need to be expanded on, as you'll see. So we have things like testimonials. And there was a previous effort a few years ago when Promote Drupal started to put together a pitch deck that has plenty of case studies and testimonials, but work is needed to make sure that these are all kept up to date and that they're put into a framework that we can easily use. So I wanted to highlight a few other things that Promote Drupal has done in the past months that you should be aware of. So in terms of Drupal.org, I think a lot of us are really excited about getting this new brand up on Drupal.org. But in the meantime, we've done some updates to the information architecture to streamline the main navigation a little bit and to start making improvements to the content. There's also case study guidelines that have been created for Drupal.org so that all the case studies that we see up there actually promote Drupal first as a product. And so that they're really celebrating the benefits of Drupal and speaking to an audience that's evaluating Drupal instead of first reflecting the maybe agencies that are writing those case studies. We also have some updates to web content, to some of the key marketing pages like the Why Drupal page, the technology overview page that we've started to make. But there's so much work left to do. So with this brand narrative, I really hope that it enables a lot more contribution and that we can scale that contribution up. So this brand is only going to be as valuable as the amount of space it takes up in people's minds, right? We need to get it all over Drupal.org. We need to get it all over LinkedIn. We need to take it to more events. Web Summit was such a great start, but we really need to be able to amplify this message up. So there's so many places where contribution is needed, and we need big contributions from agencies like I see ImageX here. They've contributed a lot. Evolving Web has contributed a lot. Acquia, of course, as you can see. But we need more agencies to take on pieces and run with it. But we also need these smaller individual contributions like rewriting a case study to change the tone of voice. Deciding to use the brand in a pitch that you're doing, or deciding to use the brand in a presentation at a conference that you've decided to speak at. These things, deciding to use a slide deck template can really plant the seed that, oh, this is the new Drupal. This is what I think of now in my mind when I think of Drupal, this exciting new brand. So that's really the call to action here, is spreading the Drupal brand all the time, everywhere. I want you to think of opportunities for you to use it and to start using it. I want you all to bookmark the dam that Sean showed you, and take those elements and see how we can use them more creatively. And I'm excited to see at the contribution sprint today, this afternoon, or right after this session, the creativity that we can get as a community if we all start using it and riffing on it and putting it to use. So the call to get involved, it's to come today to downstairs where the marketing contribution room is in B117 to 119. You can also go, for those of you watching at home, Drupal.org/marketing. We have a get involved form there. So if you want to just signal, I'm here, I'm ready to help, there's a bunch of ways you can help. You can tell us through the form how you're interested in getting involved. You can join us on Slack. We have a dedicated Slack channel. And you can also get access to the dam through that URL, so you can start downloading the assets and seeing how you can use them. And I encourage you, if you are taking me up on my challenge, and you try to use the brand and you want feedback, we want to hear from you too. So we want this to be an open dialogue. We want people to be sharing how they're using the brand. Hey, look, I use this for a camp website, or I use this in a pitch deck like this. What do you think? We want people to be really taking this open marketing to heart and sharing everything that they're doing, and we are there to help. So please let us know through the Promote Drupal Slack channel what you're doing and what you need help with. So I think that's a wrap. That's a call to action. But we are also, we have microphones. We hope you've maybe come with questions or thoughts or feedback. And so we'll take some time to answer questions here. And then as soon as we're done, we're going to head downstairs so we can all get together and start collaborating.
Hi. Oh, yeah. Hi. Thanks for mentioning calls to action. I'm looking at all these assets, and I'm thinking, when we make these landing pages, when we make these flyers, whatnot, what is the call to action for these marketing materials? Is it to download and try Drupal? Is it to connect to a vendor? Is it to download another asset? What do you want people to walk away doing after seeing these things? Yeah,
that's such a great question. I think this came up it comes up especially clearly when we do event marketing, because when we go to a conference as an agency, we always say, okay, how are we going to measure success? Like, how many leads do we want to come away with? And when Drupal was at the Web Summit, or when we've represented Drupal at other events, there's this question of, how are we going to measure success there, and what's the exact call to action going to be? I think when we look at a lot of proprietary CMSs, they have this kind of onboarding workflow, like you go to the Contentful website and you click on try it now or something, and then you get led into this funnel of newsletters that you receive to kind of get you started and show you the next steps. And because Drupal is open source, it's hard to see exactly what that funnel should look like, and it doesn't quite exist yet. So I do think that we want people to go to Drupal.org. We want them to read a case study and get convinced, and then we want them to call up one of the certified partners on Drupal.org, or we want them to try a demo, or write Drupal into the RFP. So I don't know if you want to add to that, Nikhil, since you're...
Yeah, no, that's a good question, and this is really kind of like a framework for agencies to adopt and refine your CTA, the call to action. Is it something that you are pointing them to go try it, or is it something that your agency can actually do it for a customer? But this will just help build that bridge to understanding of what is the technology that you are going to be advocating for. So really, this is more like a toolkit for you to refine your message. And if that message is more around going and trying this solution on the Drupal.org website, so be it. Or if you are advocating for it and something that your services can provide, then accordingly that message can be delivered.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for your great work. So our big competitors almost exclusively talk about DXP when they're pitching to our customers. So what's your thinking around how this framework addresses that need? And I'll keep the microphone and I'll walk it around for other people rather than you needing to come up.
Yeah, this is something we talked about a lot. I think people know Drupal as being more than a CMS. We've always talked about Drupal as being a platform that's so much more flexible than just content management. But at its core, it has really strong content management features. It is a content management system surrounded by so much more functionality that's enabled by the strong content model that it features. So we want to talk about Drupal as being both. It's a CMS, but it's also a DXP, and it's a DXP enabler. It allows you to build your own DXP because you can pick all the technology stack that you integrate on top of that CMS core. So yeah, yes.
I was just going to say, I work for a university, and our enterprise is Drupal, but I have to say our end users, meaning colleges and departments across campus, are not excited about it at all. And so we're constantly having to fight against that. And I just wanted to say I'm so excited that now I'm going to create like an onboarding checklist to get people excited. We're getting ready to do a new enterprise system. So thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it. I'm going to push hard when I get back to work. Do you have any recommendations for generating excitement within groups that are already using Drupal, but they can always go rogue and use something else?
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. That's awesome. I think a lot of times content editors get stuck because they've used Drupal in a context where it hasn't really been personalized for their experience. So a content editor who's been thrown into, here's the full back-end administrative rights for Drupal, good luck. and maybe that first experience was Drupal 6 or Drupal 7, and so things hadn't been really customized for their experience. I think when you show a content editor something that has been customized for them, where the content model really reflects what they're doing, and then also where you have a backend that's maybe using the Claro theme or even the Gin theme, you get just an experience that feels more modern. And so they're gonna feel like, oh, this is new. I'm gonna give this a second chance, but also, maybe this has been more adapted to me and it's really going to be easier to use. And I really hope that we can use that back-end experience to sell Drupal too. Like, I want the first thing to show people is, let's show some screenshots of the backend, because it's those content editors that are also really essential users of Drupal.
I can just add to it. So you said you are a university, and then you have multiple individuals, organizations so you're more of a governing body. So that's a little similar to what we do with the state of Georgia. Our team has an enterprise Drupal offering, so we have a single code base, and we run 100-some websites. So we are able to work with individual organizations. But as Suzanne mentioned, the crux of it is like down to the experience of, if it's easy for them, they are gonna be on board. And something that, and I'm looking here because Jasmine here from our digital services team, we work together on making sure that, our motto is just like, help them do the right thing easily, and then they'll just do the right thing. So I think the approach we took was just to do like a listening tour across and understand like what are those challenges that they are facing. And in the next implementation that you were talking about, are you able to kind of start from there to make their experience better? And we identified certain personas of people who are involved in this larger experience, right? Because some of the organization leaders are more concerned about how the website looks like, rather than the content management experience. So we accounted for all of those, and then ended up building our next enterprise platform. So happy to talk to you in detail, but that's great.
Do you want to take the question over here?
Hi, everyone. My name is Alex. I'm Suzanne's husband and co-founder at Evolving Web. First, I just want to say you guys have done an amazing job. This is the first time I'm seeing this in totality, and 10 out of 10, in my opinion. First, I want to add to the previous question to say that there was a slide at the beginning of this presentation saying technical innovation alone is not enough to achieve our goals, that if you build it, they will not necessarily come. And in every major initiative, whether it's the space race or any war, there's a battle on the ground, but there's also the battle for the hearts and minds. And they're always equally important. And so Dries and folks from Acquia and from other members of the Drupal community have announced a very ambitious innovation plan for the user experience, and they will make tremendous progress on it. In fact, a lot of agencies like ours and thousands of other agencies have done similar exercises for their clients and for their teams. And so it's amazing to see that UX battle being centralized and people coming together. But of course, you can't bring people together without a great communications platform. So I think this is probably the missing piece that we haven't had in a long time. And I'm very passionate about this, and thank you everybody for coming here. On my side, I would like to share our experience. So recently we hired a creative director as our company grew. That's Morgan right here. He did an initial rebrand of Evolving Web and its visual identity that you see in our social media, and you see it in our posters and our backdrop at the conference. Where you won't see it is in our website, even though it's already been a year, because it's so freaking hard to change a website that's been up for 15 years. And we have 7,000 pages. Well, Drupal.org has a lot more than 7,000 pages. I mean, is it 70,000? Is it 700,000? Is it more? something like that. So I don't know if you're going to manage to really rebrand Drupal.org first. What do you think are the main early wins that you're going to target and that you want people to collaborate on?
Well, I think there was already an early win with Web Summit, and that was sort of like a really important thing that Sean and his team worked on launching the brand for, getting feedback from folks there. I think like putting together slide decks, like ImageX has been helping with, creating a slide deck template is another easy win in terms of applying the brand, and does it require updating tons of content, and it's all fresh new stuff. I'm looking at the Drupal Association folks off to my left here because I think they're going to be really essential in making sure that we can eventually get the brand up onto Drupal.org. But personally, what I would like to see is that we break that problem space down so that it's not hundreds of thousands of pages, but rather let's try to tackle the marketing website of Drupal.org. So Drupal.org right now is really everything. It's so much. But the brand really initially needs to target evaluators who need a much smaller set of content. So let's focus on that and relaunching that website, and then let's break it down and say, well, these other elements of Drupal.org are really part of what we could consider a developer portal, and let's have that be a separate project so that it's not such a big problem to solve. So I think there's already been a lot of thinking happening there, but I think we really need to support the Drupal Association to pull this off, because it is such a big project and requires planning and investment. And so I hope that's what we see down the line in the roadmap.
But my question was specifically, what about DrupalCon Atlanta? Is that going to benefit from the new branding, or are we going to stick to the existing DrupalCon branding? What about the Drupal Association emails and blog posts? Are those going to adopt the new branding, or will they have a separate entity and with its own branding?
Yeah, absolutely. We talked about that.
Yeah, the plan is, and we have had some initial conversations with the Drupal Association engineering team. The board's involvement in this is more strategic than tactical. So I think the intention is to obviously adopt and implement this new brand, starting from the D.O website down to events and other elements, but I'm not quite sure about exactly the timeline. But definitely, as we come forward, I would like to see the newer events adopting the new brand, because I'm really excited about it. But I think for a starting point, like, please everybody go and bookmark the DAM location, and most of the assets are downloadable, and there are like these little things that we can start doing and implementing.
And I don't know how much of it was in the presentation, but there is maybe you can talk more, Sean, about the sub-brand for DrupalCon.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. As part of the larger brand guidelines, if you go onto the DAM, you can see some of the initial expressions of the brand for DrupalCon and for sub-branding, and that's still an evolving conversation, but all of that kicked off here this week, and we really hope to fast follow that with a plan for how and when to get that stuff into market. And I would also add to the point earlier about universities, getting students into the DAM, design students, getting them to play around with the visual elements, maybe making that a part of their curriculum to design some pages for Drupal.org. That right there, 10 pages at a clip per student, all of a sudden, we're building this tapestry that I showed earlier, and we're fast-tracking the redesign of Drupal.org, getting help from agencies, getting help from marketing contribution sessions like we're having later today, I think will also be really critical.
Thanks. We've got another question over here. We'll come to you next. I did find out the answer to the question about how many pages are on Drupal.org in the meantime. It's 1 million nodes. It's managed by a team of, is it 4 people? Yep. So for those that don't know, my name's Owen Lansbury. I'm also part of the Drupal Association board. and the DA has a very, very small engineering team. If there's frustration around why things don't happen faster, then please pay attention to our calls for fundraising to increase the size of that team. That team directly benefits all of our companies in the end by helping us sell Drupal to our clients. Our back of the page estimate is our back of the page estimate is that there's a $3 billion economy at a minimum that revolves around Drupal projects every year. Of that, 0.001% flows back to the DA in terms of funding. So simply by getting that to a 1% figure, then we're talking about tens of millions of dollars to solve these problems, and gets us slightly on track towards what our competitors spend. For those of you that aren't aware, Adobe spends $2.7 billion each year on product development, marketing, and sales. So that's what we're competing against by working in the enterprise market. And with that, I'm going to hand it to you.
Thank you, sir. So first up, this looks amazing. By the way, this looks really, I can see the work that's went into it. That's wonderful. So congratulations to everyone involved. I too work for a university, so another person with a university. I'm at the University of Edinburgh in the UK, and I'm very interested in web accessibility. And coming up in the next 2 years, there's an act of law coming in called the European Accessibility Act, coming into the European Union, which means effectively many organizations in the public sector, but also parts of the private sector, are going to have to meet the WCAG accessibility guidelines. In the next, do apologize, in the next 2 years, like 25, 26, I can see a lot of people in the European Union or businesses selling into the European Union looking to, with decision makers be looking for procurement to go through a process and say, well, what do they do when they move to their next platforms? Drupal, as you well know, has a very good story to tell and has a great history in accessibility, and I see a great opportunity going forward that when organizations look to reevaluate their current systems, Drupal's got a great story to tell for accessibility. Apart of, as been mentioned, the whole range of things, but inclusion and diversity is a wonderful thing to sell, and we need a story to sell that story, and I engage with the accessibility community in Europe, and to have something like this to help tell that story, because I think maybe in the past there's a lot of people who their knowledge is based upon Drupal that they maybe used 10 years ago, and as we all know, it's come a long way since then, but we've still got a lot to do. So part of it is to try and start a new narrative and to talk to people with a new story, and this is wonderful. This is the kind of thing that can be used to re-engage people, maybe people who used it in the past and they thought, oh, that, you know, they didn't do it, to tell this new story, and of course the stories going forward. I can certainly see some wonderful opportunities, and that's just one example of the accessibility. There are many other ways of trying to revitalize the story of Drupal to sell it to many people around the world. So that's all I had to say.
I think that was a comment. I also will kind of just add to that. You might have noticed I'm from Australia, and about 15 years ago we had a one-line procurement memo that said all government websites must be accessible, and that was just rocket fuel for Drupal adoption. We're up around 57% Drupal websites in government in Australia. And I'll pass it over to you.
I love that that's the topic. Not that this was the question I was going to ask, but literally just a month and a half, 2 months ago, the US Department of Justice issued a ruling that is going to be enforced through 2025, I believe, depending on the population of the governmental organizations, so whether it's a city or a county or whatnot, that will enforce WCAG 2.1 AA compliance for every government website. Government websites are going to be scrambling to hit this, and so it absolutely needs to be a part of the pitch. Accessibility is so critical. I work with a lot of large government websites. As a matter of fact, I'm from Portland. Yay, Portland.gov. That's a team that I worked with to launch that. Very proud of it. I also have a near and dear feeling about the Drupal Association team because I hired a few of them. And I can tell you that when we were a team of 10, it took us about a year to implement the previous brand implementation on Drupal.org. And I think you've got to take that into account. It's a smaller team now. We had less money influx into the Drupal Association. It is going to impact them, so I'm going to reiterate the call. Get involved, put your money towards the Drupal Association. It helps to have a centralized body like that. It's really critical. that wasn't my question at all. Like that's way back there. I was actually hearing the talk about internal large organizations that are trying to sell internally to their audiences, and I do think it's critical to have that regular messaging. If you have a platform, even if you're a marketer that's marketing out, and that's how you're thinking of it, you also have to market in, and I love the idea of using some of these slides for that regular marketing in. And I would encourage you, if you have that large platform with lots of editors, to incorporate some sort of like open office hours. They don't have to take a lot of time, maybe 30 minutes. With Washington County, we do 30 minutes every Monday afternoon that our editors get to come to the group. We present them some new features that launched the last week, and then they get to ask questions. They say, hey, how do I make this more accessible? Or I forgot how to do this particular feature. That little bit of care and feeding goes a long way. And it is, I think, a marketing opportunity. I would be kind of curious, do you think that there's pieces to either the brand statements that you have or the pieces that you have out there that could be used for that internal marketing aspects?
Yeah, I hope so. I think we really want to foster ambassadors, and I had been thinking primarily of ambassadors from this perspective of folks that are going out to events and industry, and but I think a lot of the material that we think of as being useful for onboarding new developers, maybe like a presentation you'd give at a university just introducing students to CMS, could be reused in the context of an organization that's trying to onboard new staff members or re-onboard staff members on Drupal. I do see definitely potential for reuse there, and maybe remixing. I mean, maybe some of the messaging is different, but a lot of it could be the same. So I think that's a great, and also a great way to motivate end user organizations to get involved in this initiative, because I'm really excited to see folks from universities here today, not just agencies trying to promote Drupal as part of a sales cycle. So that's great.
One of the things that we did when we were adopting Drupal was we held a Drupal day for all the organizations and all the content managers. We have probably about 500-600 of them. And then we did some presentations of like, what does this mean? Because this was actually a paradigm shift for them, because we were going open source. We were very used to a different kind of a system where their grievances were heard by us, but we couldn't do anything because we were completely at the mercy of a company that were willing to extend their roadmap or not. But now we actually could get their voices heard and actually create something that worked for everybody. So creating that almost formed like a sense of community. I would say like in a microcosm within our organization. So that time we had some 40-some websites, and after we moved all of them to Drupal, just by the sheer visual of other websites and talking to other people and their experiences, we had another 50 websites, agencies join the platform. So just creating this community and just having this wealth of, I would say, these assets to get in front of them, to show them, that the key is to just kind of keep them excited.
Take the question over here.
Yeah, I just want to say from the agency perspective, this is going to be great to have, because we've had to develop our own resources to promote Drupal. We worked with a nonprofit recently that was on the verge of going to WordPress, and we convinced them to stay on Drupal, and that was strictly because it was a new stakeholder that came in that didn't understand Drupal. And now, from the agents, like from our perspective, now it's about empowering her to learn Drupal. So this may be a question more for the DA, but is there a push to develop more camps? Because I think there's a lot of large metropolitan areas in the States that don't have camps set up, and they probably should, because it is easier to market and promote Drupal at a local, within a local environment. So I'm just curious if there is a push to do that, because, like I said, there's a lot of big cities that probably need a camp.
Yeah, I really encourage you to come to the community summit tomorrow. The event organizing working group is going to be there and talking about strategy for running camps and how to measure success with those. I know at Evolving Web, we saw this as a major thing coming back from COVID, that people were eager to meet in person, and that events are this unique place to, obviously, as we see this week at DrupalCon, get people excited, share best practices, and co-mingle like developers and Drupal end users. And so we started running a series of events called Evolve Drupal in major metropolitan areas, Atlanta, coming up in New York, to kind of fill that need. At the same time, making sure that we keep those be community organized and really keep them close to the Drupal Drupal values, the Drupal brand, I think is really important. And I think the real challenge that we see both from someone who's organized many Drupal camps and now these Evolve Drupal events and participated in DrupalCons and been on the Drupal Association, I see, getting new people into the room as being a challenge that takes concerted effort. It's not just, oh, we're having an event and so people who are interested will show up. We need to get out there into the really adjacent communities, into technology communities, women who code communities, and I know that a lot of work's been done to do that for events like DrupalCon, but the effort is not over. Like, we need to reach out to universities. We need to build this grassroots effort that's needed to build connections to universities so that they'll be aware that these events are going on and that they're valuable. So I think running the event is one key thing, but actually pulling in those new audiences and like there's many of those audiences out there is really essential. And I know Nikhil's done a lot of work kind of mentoring other organizations, and that could also be a way to pull people into events.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point. I was just going to mention that if any of you are a long-term organization using Drupal in any capacity, be that advocate. So in the last 10 years or so, I've spoken to multiple states, local governments, with exactly the same issues where they weren't sure what they were using was good for long-term, sustainable, either from a budget perspective or just technology changes. They had new leadership. They were looking for new technology options. So whatever it is, just make yourself available. I literally at one point used to carve out like half of my Friday and just schedule meetings to speak to these different organizations. And there was a lot of repetition on my part. And I wish I had something like this at my disposal, because anytime there was a win for Drupal that hit my radar, I had to go back and update my slide deck. But now with these assets that are going to be centralized and updated and available, I think that would be a great effort as well for any of you. For example, if you're a university system and you have access to any other network where you find out they are looking for it, I would say just kind of be that shameless advocate of, have you heard of Drupal? If not, please let me tell you about it. I've really had some good luck in changing minds and exposing people to Drupal, and thankfully a lot of these other states have seen the benefit of Drupal just within one presentation, where accessibility, security, things that truly matter for government, they saw the value of it and immediately made their mind. So there's a lot of potential for you all to be an advocate at different levels.
And just speaking from a Drupal Association perspective, the Drupal Association doesn't necessarily know your local needs, and they never knew anything about our local needs in Australia, and we formed a group of like-minded agencies and people passionate about Drupal to put our own Drupal South events on. Joy Garrett from the DA is starting to help liaise between those local organisers so that we're not replicating effort. And then obviously the community working group, or the community organisers group is another great resource there. We've got 4 questions lined up here. How are we going for time? Time check?
Yeah, we're good. We're good.
Yep, cool.
Howdy how, my name's Cannon. 2 questions. The individual from Portland had mentioned, I think that in Drupal, on the technical side, we're all very familiar with knowledge sharing. when it comes to some of this marketing, you had that idea about office hours or something like that. Is there a space to be able to share some of these marketing ideas when somebody kind of finds something that works for them, so on and so forth? Just want to put that on radar as a thought.
Yeah, Sean and I had been talking about that. I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, I mean, we meet as a Promote Drupal committee. We have Slack channels. We are looking to grow that group and grow that committee, and I think that's a good place to start.
Cool, thank you. Also, I have a horrible habit of saying the thing, as somebody said yesterday. This is my first DrupalCon. I've been aware and working with Drupal since about 2008, but I've been working with it consistently employed for the past year and a half. Earlier in the conversation, I heard about Drupal initiatives, and I have also heard another flavorful word, diversity and inclusion. I am just wondering, earlier in the previous conversation, I didn't hear any specific initiatives that spoke to that. And I guess here in this conversation, I don't feel as though I've heard any initiative or work that is directly speaking to that. And that is a conversation that I'd love to participate in later, if there's any comments here, but it's also a conversation I'm very passionate about, and really getting to make sure that we have both quantifiable and quantifiable steps being taken forward. But is there anything that perhaps I've missed in the past hour or two in this room regarding diversity and inclusion initiatives and marketing? Because I think, again, we can all agree that there is massive opportunity beyond just the global north that can be leveraged for our continued growth and sustainability. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's really important to us that Drupal is this global brand. And so we do have contributors to promote Drupal from, many different countries, and it's challenging actually to create meetings in the right time zone so that we can really get everybody around the table and have a discussion. Drupal itself, we want to make sure that it's a brand that has the flexibility to speak to diverse audiences, and I know many Dries notes have talked about the need to get contributors from a diverse set of backgrounds. It's something he's talked about a lot, so I hope this brand will help encourage that. And yeah, we definitely always have an open dialogue with Drupal diversity and inclusion.
And there is a DEI working group that you can be part of as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I spoke with Joy. I'm looking at expanding into Latin America. There's some opportunities, universities I'm working with down there. I work with the universities, so thank you. Just wanted to broach the conversation. Much glad.
Next question.
Hi, my name is Brian Clark. I have an agency marketing background. Now I oversee all of digital experience for the Rhode Island School of Design in Providence, Rhode Island. And first off, I wanted to echo the enthusiasm that's been shared for the brand assets and the toolkit, especially for those of us who are doing the work of trying to champion a vision of Drupal within our organization and getting users involved and understanding why it was chosen and making that case. This is going to be wonderfully helpful. So thank you. Great work. Second, though, I wanted to go back to the very first question about calls to action, because I do think, I think about there are a lot of folks who are trying to get their minds around Drupal or trying to understand. This was my position, 5 or 6 years ago. And I think I remember thinking, like, I've heard about Drupal, but I've never really seen it. Do I need a developer? Do I start with Acquia? Like, what? And so I think the question that comes, I know at the outset it was that part of the value system is, it's about a movement, not products. But I don't think that can let us shy away from taking a product level marketing approach as well as a brand level marketing approach, because there does need to be some specificity, particularly for the different audiences, around how to get started. It can be very, I think, ambiguous. It can't be like a if you know kind of vibe. And I think that, potentially with Starshot, it's only going to get a little more complicated before it gets more, more obvious. And so I just wanted to encourage, I think, some of the thinking, especially as assets are developed or web pages on Drupal.org are developed or messaging, and I'm volunteering to help with this, but thinking about some narratives that do break down kind of the options for getting going with Drupal, because I think not everyone is starting from the RFP with an agency place where you want a website, you don't know what you want to use. I think some people are earlier in the funnel and maybe thinking about, or maybe more aware of some of the other options too. And so you want to make sure that they're thinking about Drupal at that moment. Anyway, thank you.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I do think it's something where we need to invest more, and we've discussed it many times, and we're trying to design these new landing pages, and we think, yeah, like, what should the CTA be? It's great if people take the next step by going to view a case study or get a list of partners, but we know that that's not the be-all and end-all, and we talk a lot about the need for demo videos to show, here's a sense of how to use Drupal, even if you're not downloading it and trying it out because you're not a developer and you don't feel like that's the way you want to try it. You want to get a taste just from being shown. So I think that really makes sense as something that we've talked about, and I would love to see someone step up to say, yeah, I want to own having demos. I know it's a huge thing to step up and say, because it's a lot of work to create video and to maintain and to keep these types of things up to date, but it would be such a valuable contribution and something that would really be a game changer, I think.
Another shameless Drupal Association plug. So we have an open role for a product marketing director at the moment. So this has been recognized as a key need. It's been something that has never been done by the DA in the past, but there's a recognition that we need to be marketing Drupal as a product. So if anyone knows any good product marketing people, that listing is on Drupal.org at the moment. We've got 4 more questions here. Do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Morgan Geegan here. So yeah, to echo what everybody else is saying, great work, really beautiful. So I can't wait to get started using those assets. So yeah, I was just wondering, I didn't get the link to the dam. Could you show us the link again, please?
Yeah?
Oh yeah, I'll get the clicker.
Okay. Thank you.
It is up there on that /marketing page too. But we'll just go back to the QR code. Right? That's what the QR code is?
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, it's in the other deck. Sorry. Okay, you'll have to go to /marketing and then you'll see the link to the dam there.
What's the URL? Drupal.org.
Drupal.org/marketing.
We need the QR code. It's a launch.
Okay. Hi, thank you so much. This is Frederick from Norway. So in Europe, there are a lot of different languages, not English, which is very important when it comes to promoting Drupal locally. There are a lot of local needs, and a lot of people considering Drupal would like to read about that in for example, Norwegian. So do you have any plans or thoughts for how we could sort of use that when it comes to setting up local sites, for example, Drupal for Norway, etc.?
Yeah, it's always so exciting to see the work of the European Drupal communities. I know specifically in I think in the Netherlands, they've created a website, and several other countries as well that are localized like that. We'd love to see all of those be using this brand, and I think if there's momentum behind adapting that existing theme to be updated that in a way that aligns with the brand, I think that would be fantastic. I don't know what we can do as Promote Drupal to facilitate that, but we'd love to be part of it. We want to make sure everybody's aligned and able to give input. And it would also be a great testing ground for the brand, because Morgan, who spoke earlier, and I were talking about the fact that applying this brand to Drupal.org is going to require a lot of creative people kind of iterating and riffing on the brand, and we're going to come up with some ideas, but it would be great to test those out and not test those out with the homepage of Drupal.org first. We could put it on these smaller, maybe simpler websites as a first step, and that could be a great project. So we'd love to help with that.
Hi, I just wanted to see great job with the new branding. It looks great. The video was really visually interesting. I loved all the animations, and I was curious if you will have animations or animation support for all of these assets in the DAM at any point, or if you plan to sort of have any video assets that could be used.
Yeah, I love that question, and I would love for us to get there. I think initially having folks test drive the base assets on the DAM, giving us feedback, getting those up on some local websites, seeing if we need to make any tweaks. The brand guidelines have just enough guide rails for an inexperienced designer and making sure they stay intact, but they're also open-ended enough for folks to explore. And I think we're going to find some really good, surprising new solutions there in terms of still graphics. They can also inform future animations. I would love for you to build one of those too. Yeah, that's a great idea.
A Lottie generator for animations. That's what we're excited about.
Hi, I'm Sarah, and I'm from YMCA of the North, so a nonprofit, and there's been so much great talk today around acquisition and the opportunities there, but I'm thinking about the user experience more from a retention perspective and a non-technical perspective. And so can you talk a little bit more about some of the learning pathways or journeys and support for a non-technical user? Assuming that, great, we get them in the door, start using Drupal, and then what's next? That's kind of where we've struggled as a nonprofit community, in my experience within YMCA associations, is they're small teams. They don't necessarily have a ton of technical support, nor do they have a ton of time to mess around and find out, right? And so just curious to think about what some of the ideas around the continuous support for that user base.
Yeah, I think that's such a great question. I, for years, ran our training program at Evolving Web and trained lots of users in that exact situation, like, oh, I've just joined this organization and we're using Drupal, so I have to learn everything about it. And the lack of documentation often within an organization, or even coming to Drupal.org, finding exactly what you need is always a challenge. I think one of the challenges I've often seen even across organizations is that Drupal gets used in so many different ways that you find documentation for plain vanilla Drupal, like you've just installed it, or you find documentation for a really advanced distribution that has a certain set of configuration, or a site that's already been put in place, and there's custom modules. And so it's hard to have one set of documentation that works for everyone, especially when we're talking about those types of editors or administrators. And so I think when I see initiatives like Starshot that are looking more at, like, okay, how can we make things easier for editors, maybe having a bit more consistency around how things work out of the box, or providing more out of the box. Maybe this is going to be more useful to provide documentation, because then the documentation isn't just around really plain vanilla Drupal, but actually a little bit more. So that could be helpful. I would be really interested in other people's ideas, because the Drupal documentation has always been a big project and something a lot of people have invested in, but it's not a solved problem.
Yeah, I think one of the factors there is that the Drupal Association is very careful not to compete with commercial vendors, and so there's an ecosystem of Drupal training providers out there that we're very supportive of, but the DA doesn't have any direct involvement in how they run their activities. Got a question up the back?
Hi, my name is Phoenix, and I'm here actually representing Twin Cities Drupal Camp, and I hear your call to action. And I'm really excited that these materials are here. It takes a load off of a lot of us who are organizing those local camps that, hey, we have this fantastic branding that we can then plunk into whatever or share with our presenters so that they have a resource to then make their slide decks. So I would really like to say thank you from a local organizer.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Anyone else have a question? Yep. You've already had one.
Hi, one more question. By the way, I'm David. I see a lot of graphic design assets that look really great. Are we going to do a similar deck for copy and the way we position with words? And there's like a real fine line between having a point of view and personality and being like Steve Buscemi, how are you doing, kids? Like, being really cringy. And I was wondering, where you all felt we want to be. Do we want to have a verbal personality of a kind? How do we want to express that? Do we want to be more, matter of fact? I've seen all kinds of takes on Drupal, from like the ultra cringe to the extremely dry, and it'd be interesting to see where we land with the words to match with the images.
Yeah, I think part of that is getting more marketing folks on board and getting these larger groups, getting some writers in here, really establishing messaging guides. And then also to your earlier question about call to action, I think it's on the marketing working group and the Promote Drupal community to start getting into audience segmentation so that we can give these toolkits, if you will. Because if you're talking to a marketer with a call to action, that might be around brand awareness, because that's an untapped audience that we need to really activate. And we need to translate the value of Drupal to them and build brand awareness, versus a highly technical person. We might want to push them to a piece of technical documentation or, a star shot page. So we need to arm people, I think, with a highly segmented persona-based set of messaging. And I think with more marketers on board and more contributions, our just kind of voice and tone there will start to take shape.
There is a general purpose content style guide for Drupal.org that I've looked at a couple times to think, how do we need to update this? And there's definitely some updates that are needed. I think generally it's still pretty applicable to what we have with the new brand and the brand narrative, but I think it's missing some of those more specific audience nuances that Sean was talking about.
Okay, I don't think we have any other questions here. Oh, we do, yeah.
Out of time.
Hello, my name is Matthias. I'm coming from Switzerland, Europe. I sold Drupal a lot of times quite successful to customers, but I always try to focus on the customer. What are his pain points? Why he is even considering buying a new content management system? Has this been part of the discussion, or is this an evolving project?
Yeah, so we did create personas. We did a survey of users, and then Sean delved more into that as part of the brand work to speak more to folks. So that was part of it, and as we continue to create content, we're continuing to think about audience. Like the technical overview page, we think first, who are we writing this for? Folks preparing RFPs, or folks selling Drupal to their boss, or this type of technical ambassador at an organization. And so that's part of the work of writing the content for sure. But definitely something we have to continually think about. I think we're at time, but there's one more question from this gentleman here. Maybe we can answer.
Thank you, Suzanne. I think whether you're a university with 1,000 departments or a multinational or a global community, there's a lot of groups and a lot of different people with a lot of different ideas. And a brand is supposed to be something that is united and consistent across these applications, these channels, these groups. Will the Drupal Association or some other entity on behalf of Drupal have a brand czar, somebody who will apply, make sure that this vision that you've outlined today is adapted and applied consistently and intelligently. It probably can't be anyone on this stage, so I think the question is more, who do you guys think it could be, and where do you think the solution might come from?
Yeah, I think that's a great next step because we obviously need governance. We also need more inputs. So to your point, we want a lot of inputs to come in, you know, as this continues to grow, and then it's our job to kind of curate those and succinctly create outputs that can be used anywhere in the world, because I think we're there on the visual side in terms of the brand guidelines. We're starting to do that, and we can continually to point back to those and be looking at designs and say, no, actually, point back to the brand guidelines. No, but it's the language piece also, as the messaging documentation starts to develop, that we're really going to need to pay close attention to.
Also, to your question about the czar, you know, Owen mentioned the new position that Drupal Association is looking for. I think that particular role can be the person could be directing, and I don't know how much enforcement is possible given it's such a small team, and obviously they are already allotted, but I think the direction or any maybe, you know, need for direction if anyone has questions as far as adopting, and I can totally see where this is the larger brand, but as it kind of gets down to different cultures, different communities, there could be, you know, need for sub-brands, and so those conversations definitely probably would be led from that perspective.
And you're not going anywhere, are you, Sean?
Not until my flight this evening.
Okay,
cool.
I think we'll
We're
wrap
out
it
of
up there. Big thanks to Nikhil, Suzanne, and Sean. And what's the next step from here?
So please join us at 1 o'clock in the contribution rooms downstairs. See you there.
Thank you.
And thank you, Owen, for your coordination.